I'm a Bears fan, man. I've seen it all. Like I'm just dead inside. Nothing can hurt
Yeah.
me anymore. I just roll with the punches. I can't wait for this team to draft Caleb Williams and destroy his development too. It's just the way things are. If you're a Chicago fan, we're used to it at this point.
So, I guess you're rolling with Justin Fields this week after all that?
Justin Fields, wheels up. Let's go. My QB6 on the week.
Week 3 is finally here, and we are taking a look at our starts of the week. We're joined by a special guest, Jordan McNamara. You can follow him on Twitter at McNamara Dynasty. Guys, let's not waste any time. Let's hop right into the quarterbacks. Dave, why don't you kick us off with your quarterback start of the week in week 3?
Now, I really haven't talked about this guy too much over the last couple of weeks because it's been bleak for Justin Fields. But I think this is a week that you can kind of plug him back in, and I'm going to drive right down Narrative Street here. So any Sigmund Bloom fans that are listening to this on the Audible feed, you know what I'm talking about. But he came out on Wednesday in a press conference and said that he needs to start playing more free. Now, what does that mean exactly? I don't know, but hopefully it's something like last year, where to start the season, weeks 1 through 4, he was playing in the confines of the offense, and he was the QB 31 in fantasy scoring. And then in week 5, he just kind of stopped playing the offense and just running all over the place. And from that point on, he was the QB 3 in fantasy scoring. So we've seen this style of play from Justin Fields before. And while it might not be good for real life football, it is amazing for fantasy football. So hopefully we just see him revert to playing with his legs for the rest of the year, and we can get some of that fantasy goodness back. Now, the other thing that I want to say is, like, Fields hasn't necessarily been a bad play. I mean, despite 2 horrendous outings and less than half of last year's rushing production, he has still been the QB 16 in scoring. So, Jordan, I'm ready to concede. I know you're not a big Justin Fields fan. I think we have seen the end of the Justin Fields era. I will be really surprised if he's still the quarterback going into 2024. But I'm going to milk this cow for as much as I can to ride out the rest of the season and try to get as much fantasy production as possible. And I think that we can see it happen this week against Kansas City.
Yeah, it's funny because I was a huge Justin Fields fan coming in, and I've just become disillusioned by what I've seen over the past 2 years, and then coming into this year. But I was a huge. I actually had him. I would have taken him ahead of Lawrence, right? Like given what we knew, I would have taken him ahead of Lawrence. It just didn't. It didn't. It has not panned out. He looks like. Remember when Sam Darnold said he thought he was seeing ghosts, right? Like That's what it looks. That's what Justin Fields looks like right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, he just stands in the pocket, has wide open receivers, and you can tell. I don't know if it's that he's scared to run or scared to take the deep shots. It almost looks like he's been overcoached, like where they said, hey, we want you doing this. And now he is just scared to throw the ball more than 5 yards downfield, and he's scared to take off running with the ball. So when he says that he's playing more free, that could just be whatever coming out of his mouth during a press conference. But I hope that what that means is that we see him play like he did in the second half of last year.
Yeah, Dave, have you seen I'm sure you have the clip going around where they break down everything. It's not necessarily an all 22 view of it, but it's the camera view from behind Justin Fields where you see he has a wide open man running up the seam for a touchdown. And instead of throwing the ball, he just runs directly into the defensive line. It's just, he doesn't look right. Something
Time
looks
is a
off
flat
in his
circle.
head.
Do you remember the picture of Mitch Trubisky from a few years ago where he's standing at the 20-yard line and there's just a wide open defender or a wide open receiver with nobody in between him standing in the end zone waving his arms? I'm a Bears fan, man. I've seen it all. Like I'm just dead inside. Nothing can hurt me anymore. I just roll with the punches. I can't wait for this team to draft Caleb Williams and destroy his development too. It's just the way things are if you're a Chicago fan. We're used to it at this point.
So I guess you're rolling with Justin Fields this week after all that?
Justin Fields, wheels up. Let's go. My QB6 on the week.
All right, Jordan, let's get to your quarterback start of the week. Maybe there's a little more optimism.
All right, I'm in on Derek Carr, and I'm in on Derek Carr because of a couple of things. He has a trio of wide receivers with Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, and Rashid Shaheed that are at the top, would rival any other team out there. Rashid Shaheed, by the way, is just spectacular, even though I don't think many people appreciate exactly how good he is. Carr has an expectation of 4.2 passing touchdowns so far, and he only has one. So he's actually graded out. He's performed pretty well, but underperformed in fantasy. I think it's definitely a week where you can see him take off. And again, like if the touchdown stuff regresses to what he's actually been performing at that level, I think he's in for a potentially huge year.
And in a matchup with likely no Jamal Williams, Kendry Miller getting his first start, Alvin Kamara still not there, they're going to have to lean on the pass a little bit more. So, kind of building up my case a little bit for one of my wide receiver starts later on in the show.
Yeah, and I think Derek Carr is one of those guys that's still, I mean, I don't think we've necessarily seen him be consistently good for fantasy yet, but I think there's something cooking there in New Orleans where that offense, they always seem like they're right on the cusp of having one of those big time scoring games. And Derek Carr, they may have to lean on him in this game here. I'm going to give you the
Yeah.
final quarterbacks. Oh yeah, go for it. Go for it.
No, he leads the league in ADOT too, right? Like it's like there's like he has it's coming, right? It is coming. It just hasn't landed yet. But a 400-yard, 4-touchdown game is out there at some point.
So I'm going to give you my final quarterback start of the week here in week 3. And I don't know, maybe this one is actually just becoming obvious because he's been pretty good, but Tua Tagovailoa, quarterback for the Miami Dolphins. And week 1 was phenomenal. Week 2, not as much, right? Going up against the New England Patriots, but that's something that has happened throughout his career. That's that game is always kind of the knockout, drag out fight where things get really slowed down and it becomes a bit more of a run fest there. But going up against the Broncos this week, this is a Denver Broncos team that I think that we're all a bit used to the defense that had been able to shut down quarterbacks and generate a lot of pass rush. This is not that same defense. They allowed both Jimmy Garoppolo and Sam Howell to each pass for 2 touchdowns, looking at 19 and 25 fantasy points respectively. And this is an interesting stat that I found. Tua Tagovailoa leads all quarterbacks in the league, okay, in highly accurate throws and yards per attempt when given a clean pocket. Interesting, because he's also simultaneously leading the league in fastest average time to throw and yards per attempt. The Denver Broncos, 31st in the league in time taken to pressure the quarterback. So Tua not going to be getting pressured all that much. Looks like Teron Armstead is going to be back this week for week 3. It is the home opener for the Miami Dolphins if we want to get a little narrative-y here. I mean, it's interesting how much the Dolphins are willing to count on Tua Tagovailoa in the passing game this year, even more than ever. They're doing it in the red zone too. He's got the most pass attempts from inside the 10-yard line. He's been pretty accurate there as well, throwing for 3 touchdowns. I don't think it's all that crazy to say that throughout this year, he's already looked like a top 5 quarterback. That might be a little bit of homer in me, but Jordan, I know you're a resident numbers guy. You're a big analytics guy here at Football Guys. I said guys a lot of times in that sentence there, but
on brand.
Tua. I mean, this is he looking legit? I know you did your recent article on are these guys for real? Is Tua for real?
He has the best odds to win the MVP right now, which is wild, right? And again, it's never been a concern. Crazy. Like the last under Mike McDaniel, it's never been a concern about can he play. It's been a concern about can he get on the field, right? Once he's on the field, it's been really, really good. And I mean, just what they do with Tyreek Hill is just absolutely crazy stuff, and hyper productive. It's just a question of when he can play. It's almost like he's almost like the Michael Thomas of the quarterback position. Like when he is playing, he should be in your lineup. It's just a question of how much you're going to get. And I tend to think we probably overweight concussion concerns, right? Just generally, there's been a lot of guys where they've gotten a couple concussions in a near, in a close together thing where it builds a narrative in our brain. And then, Devontae Adams has gone a long time without that being a concern, where it was a huge concern early on in his career. Brandon Cooks as well, right? So like those things are I think tend to, once you go some time without them, right, those tend to fade. And I think, you have gotten a discount on Tua, right? Anytime he's on the field, like it's go time, and he has shown that. So yeah, it's pretty exciting. That offense is really exciting.
Alfredo, you're talking about the QB6 in scoring right now and the QB5 in consensus rankings. I think everyone's starting Tua. I mean, unless you're in, a position where you've also got Mahomes and Allen and somebody else on your team, I think Tua has just worked his way through the first 2 weeks into an absolute must start at this point every single week. If for some reason you have another one of these elite quarterbacks, throw it out on the trade block and see what you can get in return. Try to tier up at running back or receiver or something like that, because Tua is looking like an elite must-start option every week.
Well, and I picked him because he did have kind of a down game last week where he wasn't even a top 20 fantasy quarterback. So I'm sure there's probably some fantasy managers out there questioning like, is it just, like the one big, boom game like he did last year against the Ravens? And then you get a bunch of mediocre games. So the offense it looks different this year. I don't know what it is, honestly. It just really does. If you're enjoying this video so far, please give this a like and subscribe to the channel. Okay, we are bringing you this show 4 times a week on video, and then a 5th episode on audio as well. So you can subscribe to the podcast. The link is in the description down below. And then Sunday mornings, we're bringing you the live start sit show all the way from 10:30 till almost up to kickoff. Okay, so we are giving you a lot of advice on Sunday mornings, and be sure to drop your questions about start sit stuff here for week 3 in the comments down below. Now, gentlemen, we're going to run through these a little bit faster because we have a lot of starts of the week here for the running back position. Dave, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, I'll keep this one really short, sweet, and to the point. Zach Moss going up against Baltimore. He was your start of the week last week, my start of the week this week. Smashed for 20.7 PPR points last week.
Yeah, he
He's got
did.
a pretty good matchup. Now, he was on the field for 98% of the snaps in week 2. That's unheard of in today's NFL to see a running back getting that sort of snap share. And he saw 100% of the running back touches. So, Zach Moss probably isn't a guy that's going to stay in your lineup for the entire season, but we got 2 more weeks until Jonathan Taylor comes back or goes to another team or whatever it may be. Ride the hot hand for now. You're starting Zach Moss as a top 15 running back until further notice.
And further notice could be like 1 more week after this, but
It
hey,
could be.
ride it. All right, Jordan, why don't you drop your week 3 start of the week at the running back position for us?
Josh Kelly. The Chargers in week 1 had a 100th percentile success rate in rushing, right? It was just an incredible rushing performance. And now they face a Vikings defense that surrendered more than 3 yards before contact in week number 2 against DeAndre Swift. No Eckler, minimal usage from the backups. And it's a high team total. They're in the mid 50s in terms of the Vegas over underline. I think this could be a game that scores a lot of points, and they're second in the red zone in play volume, and they run it about 52% of the time inside the 10, right? That's that's a decent number, about right at the league median. But when you're running a ton of plays down there, that's good. Justin Herbert doesn't run down there that much. Like it's pretty good setup. 7th in terms of overall running back expected points per game so far for this team, right? This could be a really, really good spot.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm not even let's not waste any time. My first running back start of the week here is also Joshua Kelly. So let's double down on it here. I want as much of this game as possible. Los Angeles Chargers, Minnesota Vikings. Like you said, that projected point total is at 54 right now. And we saw Minnesota got absolutely destroyed by DeAndre Swift on the ground, who, I think DeAndre Swift is a little bit more talented than Joshua Kelly, but 175 rushing yards from one running back is a hell of a lot. And if Joshua Kelly is getting the opportunity that we think he will in this game, I just want as much of it as possible. There's not too many running backs getting the volume that he could get if Austin Eckler is out nearly 80% of the snaps in week 2 against that tough Tennessee defense. So yeah, I'm starting Josh Kelly with confidence this week against the Minnesota Vikings. Dave, give us your next running back start of the week here. This one's spicy. Ooh. Yeah, wait,
Joshua
hold
Kelly,
up.
he's got a great matchup up against Minnesota, so I want Joshua Kelly in my lineup. No, I'm kidding. I'm going with Jaylen Warren here, and yeah, this is a little bit spicier. He's a little bit further down the list than some of the other guys.
I'm sorry that I totally stepped all over your joke, man. My bad.
That's all right. It was a lame joke anyway. Don't worry about it. But the Raiders, they've given up 31.7 points to running backs over the first 2 weeks, second most in the league. James Cook gashed them for 159 yards last week, and the week before, Samaje Perine and Javonte Williams combined for 135 yards. So, first of all, I want to dispel this illusion that Najee Harris is just like the worst running back in the NFL. Like, they're not going to take him out back and old yeller him. He is still a very capable running back, and he's not nearly as bad as people think he is. But that doesn't mean that Jaylen Warren can't have value himself. He has been a spark plug when he gets the ball in his hand. He's 6th in juke rate, 14th in evaded tackles, 19th in yards created. But what really jumps out to me is that he is leading all running backs with 12 targets. He's got the second most receptions with 9 receptions behind only Bijan Robinson. They just can't hold him off that long. I mean, he has earned a role in this offense, and he's not going to usurp Najee Harris's role. That's just not going to happen, so don't expect that. But his role in the pass-catching game alone makes him flex-worthy in this matchup against Baltimore, where they have given up a lot of points to running backs. I'm sorry, not Baltimore. Las Vegas, who has given up a lot of points to running backs.
Well, I was going to commend you on good worst of the word usurp, and then you just were talking about the wrong defense the whole time. So you know what? All the smart points you got, they go right back down. You starting back again at 0. Jordan, hit us with your second running back start of the week for week 3.
Hey, confusing Ravens and Raiders, that's something that I would do. So I forgive it, Dave. Don't worry about it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
James Cook, right? Thanks you guys for shouting out that article that I write. I mentioned him in it. I think the stats are real. Ranks 5th in non touchdown scoring, which is good because he hasn't scored a touchdown yet, but he's expected for about a half touchdown per game. So I would expect him to see the end zone here coming up. Very much in the model of how Aaron Jones can be one of those a premier running back. He's not going to be a 20 touch guy, but if he can get into the mid teens, it's really good with that receiving profile as well. The team ranks 2nd in expected running back points. And by the way, this is an absolute Devin Singletary tore down the running back position because he was such a bad pass catcher for Buffalo in the last 4 years of his career. It's been a total transformation in terms of what they're getting. 13th in routes, which is pretty consistent with where they've been through the Josh Allen era, but 9th in targets, 9th in receptions per drop back, and 11th in yards per drop back. Those were into the 20s and down towards 30 in the Devin Singletary era. That's just how bad of a pass catcher Devin Singletary was. We've seen it completely morph under James Cook, and we're actually getting the running back failure there out of that position. So I'm not sure he's going to be a huge touchdown scorer on the ground, but the volume is absolutely there, and the production is absolutely there from a non-touchdown basis. And listen, if he kicks in a half a touchdown a game the rest of the way, we're going to get a top 12 running back.
Easily. I mean, right now he's on pace for over 1,900 scrimmage yards, which is absurd. I feel like a lot of the guys that we're talking about today are guys that are kind of floating under the radar, and the only reason they've done so is because they haven't found pay dirt yet. A lot of these guys that we're mentioning, like if they were scoring touchdowns, we'd be super excited about them, but people just look at the box score, look at the fantasy production, think these guys are flex players when really they're worth so much more than that. Yeah, James Cook has RB1 stamped all over him this year.
Dave, look at you. That's called growth. Okay, that's big. Because I know in the offseason, we talked a lot about Damian Harris potentially taking away these goal line carries.
An afterthought. He is an afterthought in this offense.
And you know what, though, is that the Bills' backfield, the other running backs are still taking away some of those goal line carries, and it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for James Cook, man. Yep. So that's going to be interesting to see how that continues to play out. I'm sure Bills fans and fantasy managers for James Cook are very happy right now. I'm going to give us our last running back start of the week. And listen, this one, there's not a lot of data to go off of. This is a pure volume play and a pure vibes-based play here. I kind of did the same thing last week with Zach Moss. Kendre Miller, running back for the Saints here, going up against the Green Bay Packers. And listen, it's not a very juicy matchup either. It's a very middle of the road matchup. Week 1, the Packers were good against the Bears run game. And then week 2, they gave up plenty of yardage to Bijan Robinson. Okay. And I'm not going to sit here and compare Kendre Miller to Bijan Robinson. Okay. But 172 total yards by Bijan. It's kind of hard to ignore that. And you'd like to think that the Saints might try to copy some of the things that the Falcons were able to do in week 2. In terms of Kendre Miller, I love the skill. I loved the college tape. I love this opportunity. With no Jamal Williams playing in week 3, Alvin Kamara is still not back. Tony Jones truthers, come on. He's a fringe practice squad player. I know, Jordan. I know we talked about it before the show. I think honestly, and I think for most people, the biggest worry is going to be Taysom Hill. And I think that's where a lot of people are going to say, like, I almost called him Jamal Williams. Kendre Miller is probably going to get vultured here by Taysom Hill. And last week he got 9 carries for 75 yards. I will say I do think that a lot of that has more to do with not having Jamal Williams and not having their real lead back in that game. If Kendre Miller is going to be starting in this game with no Jamal Williams, I have to assume that a lot of the game plan is going to be, let's go get this highly drafted rookie some touches early in his career and let's get him going, especially since we don't have any other legitimate running backs on the team. So Kendre Miller, this is more of one of those, if you picked him up recently off waivers and he's just been sitting there, it likely means you have a need at running back. He's probably one of those guys that's going to be more of like an RB3 flex play. Okay. I'm not touting him as a top 24 start or a must start guy, but he's a player that if you went out and grabbed him, this was the moment that you grabbed him for. All right, guys, let's move on to our wide receiver starts of the week. Dave, kick us off because we're talking about someone. This is going to be our third Saints player that we're talking about.
Yeah, so I guess we're all expecting big things from the Saints. I mean, Green Bay's defense looks a little bit better this year, but they have still been beatable through the air. We just didn't really see it week 1 because they played against Justin Fields. But Michael Thomas going up against Green Bay, still is kind of floating out there, like in consensus rankings, as a back end flex play, which I'm kind of shocked by. He falls in as my wide receiver 24 in rankings this week, and he's had 8+ targets in back to back weeks. And Jair Alexander, he's not just going to shadow MT, so I'm not too worried about that happening. Michael Thomas has been moving all over the formation. He's playing out wide, he's playing in the slot. The Packers have been good at limiting big plays, but they got picked apart by Desmond Ridder in the middle of the field last week. So if Desmond Ridder can pick them apart in the middle of the field, I think we can see Derek Carr do the same here. I think the concern here for all of us getting excited about this game is that it does have a 43-point total, the over-under. So that's a little bit worrisome, if we're expecting Derek Carr and Kendre Miller and Michael Thomas, all these guys to break out. Somebody might end up being the odd man out, but I think Michael Thomas can be the wide receiver 1 in this game, even though Chris Olave is probably the better guy for the year-long bet, who you want to be the guy in the Saints. With the Packers' ability to limit those big plays, I think this could be a big opportunity for Michael Thomas to step up, hopefully find the end zone for the first time of the season, and maintain that target share that he's seen through the first 2 weeks.
Jordan, you've got a wide receiver start of the week here that has become the golden boy of the NFL, and we joke that he's like in some leagues he might still even be on waivers, but he's also probably getting ready to be enshrined into the NFL Hall of Fame. Puka Nacua, wide receiver for the Rams. Talk to us about why he's. I think it's almost a foregone conclusion. He's a must start. Would anyone be second guessing him?
No, I just want to make sure that no one is, right? That's actually why I put him on the list. By the way, Dave, you're absolutely right. Any week that Michael Thomas plays, play him, right? He's a 7 target a game guy. Just put him in the lineup and don't worry about it, right? And then he gets hurt. Exactly. If he gets hurt, he gets hurt. You deal with it then. But every week you just play him. Puka Nacua, I found some amazing stats. You go ahead and check out that article. Is it real? Since 1992, there have been 3 wide receivers to start their career with at least 25 targets. Terry Glenn with 26, Anquan Bolden with 27, and Puka Nacua with 35. Puka Nacua has 25 receptions. Since 1992, only 2 people have had more targets in the first 2 weeks of their career. Again, that's Glenn and Bolden, than Puka Nacua has. And it's just an unbelievable stretch here. I have a saying that when you look at these things, you cannot fake elite. Right. And we have dealt with this in small sample sizes with guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, to some degree with Tyreek Hill before he really, really broke out for a full season long thing. When you see people do elite things that are extremely rare and difficult to do, you have to put a lot of faith in that is actually real and not fake production. And everything checks out, right? North of 35% target per route run, right? I mean, this is just an absolute, it's an absolute treat. And by the way, he has a quarterback that can actually sustain it. Matthew Stafford has the top 2 receiving yardage seasons of all time for wide receivers, Calvin Johnson and Cooper Kupp on his resume, right? This is a quarterback that can deal to wide receivers, and we are seeing it in the most probably surprising of ways. And by the way, Tutu Atwell has been spectacular. Like, if it wasn't for Puka Nacua, we would be talking about how good Tutu Atwell is, right? 2 top 10 guys. It's just been crazy. So just start Puka Nacua. It's real.
I just got to say, you're doing a great job of foreshadowing all the guys that I want to talk about, Jordan. I really appreciate that. You're setting me up well. But let me just run this by you real quickly, because I've got Puka Nacua in my rankings this week as my wide receiver 10, and it feels too low. Like, it feels crazy putting him ahead of guys. Like, here's the guys that I have ahead of Puka Nacua: A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Devontae Adams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Stephon Diggs, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson. I can't put him ahead of any of those guys, can I? Like, he needs to stay at least at wide receiver 10 for now, right?
But just think of that. Like, that's where he falls, right? Like, it's incredible, right? Like, it's awesome that we're here. I like these stories are super unlikely. So when they happen, it's really, really fun to enjoy them. So I hope it is real. I hope he stays healthy. I'd be curious to see how Cooper Kupp impacts it. His return. I don't think he's going to absolutely trounce him out. I know some people are concerned about that. I don't think that's true. But
Tutu's probably the odd man out when Kupp returns.
Yeah, or Stafford could lead the league in passing, right? That's the other one. Like, is Stafford like this? I don't know if that team's good enough, but like, what's the Stafford fat tail in that scenario? Like, it's pretty interesting if all those guys stay healthy. But yeah, it's a treat to watch, and you don't have to worry about Cooper Kupp returning this week. So just roll him out, and we'll see what happens when it happens.
We've been talking about the Rams a lot on this show. I think we're both really, really excited. I mean, I said it after week one. I said I didn't expect this. You know, we were talking a few days ago about this team tanking for Caleb Williams, and now they look like legitimate NFC North or NFC contenders. Can't ignore it. I mean, the Rams they're a fun team to watch this year, and they're only going to get better when Cooper Kupp comes back.
Listen, that's what happens when you have Sean McVay as your coach. Sorry, Joe.
Yep.
We had to get at least a one sorry Joe into the episode today.
Yeah.
All right. My wide receiver start of the week, first one here is going to be Jordan Addison, wide receiver for the Minnesota Vikings. Chargers are dead last against fantasy wide receivers so far this season. I know that so much of that comes off of that first game against the Miami Dolphins and Tyreek Hill, but it's not like they're going up against a mediocre offense or a passing attack that isn't scoring points. Kirk Cousins so far has been really good. So much so that Dave, in our last episode, you called him a fantasy sell. And I was actually saying, like, you know what? The schedule still remains kind of easy. The Vikings might just keep going on this hot streak. And I'm kind of expecting that again here against the Chargers. Like we said, this is the game that we want as many pieces of as possible because of the implied point totals. Kirk Cousins right now, he's tied for first in passing touchdowns, second in passing yards. He's fourth in attempts. Dave, I can't remember. You said he's on pace right now to throw the ball how many times or throw for how many yards?
6,000 yards and 51 touchdowns, which
seems reasonable.
Pretty historic, yeah.
Be a record.
seems reasonable. That's pretty on par for 2023 so far. But you know what we've seen right now is that Jordan Addison has just been incredibly efficient. He's had touchdowns in each of his first two games, and I don't necessarily want to imply that I'm expecting another touchdown in this game, but I mean, sheesh, if there was a game where it's going to happen, you'd think it's this one going up against this secondary with the amount of points that are expected to be put up. What I like right now is that despite that efficiency, the volume has been going up. The snap share percentage went up from week 1 to week 2 from 56% to 69%. Nice. And Jordan Addison, we kind of expect that to continue to grow. There's a reason they drafted him this highly. He should be the wide receiver 2 on this team over KJ Osborne. And this just gives him another opportunity to score. He should be a low-end wide receiver 2 this week or high-end wide receiver 3 as his role continues to grow. All right, guys. We mentioned a Rams wide receiver earlier. And Jordan, you kind of foreshadowed this next guy for Dave. Dave, talk to us about Tutu Atwell and why he's a start for you this week in week 3.
I mean, he's got 196 receiving yards through 2 weeks. That's the 8th most in the
there
NFL.
You go. That's it.
And I think Jordan summed it up perfectly here that, like, if Puka Nacua wasn't doing what Puka Nacua is doing, Tutu Atwell would be the talk of the NFL right now. It's one of the biggest surprises out there. Not only am I saying he's a must start, but he's still available in a ton of leagues because I think people think that this is just a mirage, but Tutu Atwell right now is just crushing it. He saw 9 targets in week 2, and he's the temporary wide receiver 2 there. We don't know how things are going to last when Cooper Kupp does return, but this Rams offense is just one I want to invest in. Cincinnati has not looked great this year. If Burrow misses, it could get ugly quickly, and this passing attack that Los Angeles has could just completely light it up. So Tutu Atwell fits inside my top 25 this week.
Nicely done, Dave. You got a lot of confidence in this Rams passing attack, and it feels like it's justified at this point. I don't think anyone would argue with you. Now, Jordan, we go from the Rams to their former quarterback and the Detroit Lions, that their offenses looked really good, so much so that this wide receiver actually looked really great for fantasy managers last week. Talk to us about Josh Reynolds and why he's your week 3 start of the week at the wide receiver position.
A former Rams wide receiver himself. He's averaged.
Oh my gosh, how did I miss that?
Yeah, it's averaged 17.8 points per game. He does have 2 touchdowns, but listen, 6 targets per game. He has averaged 2.47 yards per route run, which is just a crazy number. I was watching him the other day, and I was just appreciating how I'm not a big tape guy, but if you watched him and Amon-Ra St. Brown, all the fine points of the offense, right? When they were route running, like all the fine points, they had him down, and the offense cooks when that happened. Jared Goff's having probably his best year start so far, right? If he stayed on this pace, it would be probably his best year. 80% route participation as well. There's some schematic things to suggest that this might be a tougher matchup for Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm not sure I necessarily rely on the sample size, but if he did, that would be a place where Josh Reynolds would benefit as well. So, but yeah, again, the touchdowns are high, but I think even independent of the touchdowns, I think it's a pretty solid wide receiver 3 type profile at this point.
Yeah, I think there's a theme that's starting to trend here, which is just go and target the good offenses that have good matchups. Now, that's what we're seeing. Guys with just opportunity in good offenses. I'm going to close this out here at the wide receiver position and bring up my start of the week, Zay Flowers. Dave, I know your heart is a flutter right now with Zay Flowers talk. They're going up against the Colts this week. Colts have allowed the second most fantasy points to wide receivers this season. Once again, good offense going up against a bad secondary here. In the first 2 games, the Colts allowed 5 wide receivers to score at least 13 fantasy points. They've given up 4 touchdowns to wide receivers over the first 2 weeks here. I think we can expect this Ravens offense to be able to take advantage of that. Zay Flowers, he appears to be the second target on this team behind Mark Andrews. I know that Andrews is obviously he's going to be the primary guy here, but Zay Flowers is getting these manufactured touches. Dave, we talked about this on a couple episodes about a couple different guys.
It's not a reason to discredit a player.
Yeah, manufactured touches is not a
Mhm.
bad word. Like it's not. It's a good phrase. That means he's talented and that the team wants to get him involved. Volume is good.
This guy sucks. The coaches want to get the ball in his hand.
That's
Get
the
outta
most
here.
that's the most ridiculous thought process that I've come across in the fantasy industry or fantasy football game. But yes, you get the ball into the hands of really good players. That's what the Ravens are doing. Zay Flowers, man, when he touches it every single time, he's a threat to take it to the house. So start Zay Flowers this week. He should be a good low end wide receiver 2 for you. Now, before we keep going, I want to let you guys know tight end has been the hardest position to predict. And because of that, we want you to come and join us over on the audio version of this, where we're going to continue talking about the tight end position and give you our 3 tight end starts of the week. So if you've been enjoying this video, head on over to the audio version of this show. You'll see the link in the description down below where you can subscribe to the podcast. I want to thank Jordan McNamara so much for joining us here for our week 3 starts of the week. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.